John Lepore is the Senior Vice President for Pipeline Management at GSK. He's a cardiologist by training, and interestingly, like many of our speakers today, he spent a number of years on faculty at Mass General. So John, thank you.
Thanks, great to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
And John and I are here to talk. This panel right now is essentially an embodiment of what the entire conference has been about. You know, the aspiration for this conference is, and hopefully making it different than so many others, is that discussion, dialogue, question and answers are what dominate, rather than an epilogue at the end of presentations characterized by rushing through a long set of PowerPoints. The conversation among principals is what we seek to have. And this concept of doing a Springboard challenge is really a similar expression, really an extension of that, where all the folks that came here, all the speakers, all the hard work to prepare shouldn't just end with the discussion and what'll come after this, that there'll be a means to hopefully drive new teams that will act in response to what they heard today. So just a quick background, and hopefully folks have seen it in the materials. The concept of the challenge is that there's a committee, and it's very representative of multiple organizations that were involved in the planning, that will evaluate proposals that come against 3 topics, which will be promulgated in the next couple of days. That will kind of be a takeaway from the forum. And then those applications will be competitively reviewed, and 3 awards will be made of roughly $50,000 each. And on the grand scheme of things, maybe not an enormous amount of money, but if you think about this being very early in the spectrum and making resources available to seed a team, to help with the planning, to help for the concept of trying to really promote risk-taking and higher rewards than the normal evolution of a team would have. That's the concept of this Springboard Challenge. And I'm up here with John because he's living every single day this question of innovation and its clinical application. And John, a few thoughts from your perspective as a clinician, as someone who worries about improving the health of patients every day, about innovation and its application.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. And again, thanks for the invitation. It's great to reconnect with some old colleagues from partners as well as some new. As you said, it's not my field. I'm a cardiovascular scientist. But it's been striking to hear some of the analogies and comparisons to the cardiovascular field. And it really is the case where 25, 30 years ago, many aspects of cardiovascular disease were discussed in the same context as we are discussing Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases today. And I do share the optimism of the prior panel. But for me, Chris, it's really a matter of the collaboration that's going to be required to solve the problem. And from a large pharma point of view, and Al Sandrock expressed something similar as did John Leichletter before, we by definition can't do this on our own. And there are so many elements that are required to bring a medicine forward. And just, I made myself some notes going through today and the morning, additional understanding of the basic pathophysiology, establishing biomarkers, be they imaging or in the CSF or digital. Who's going to do them? Who are the people with the right math background? Who are the technology owners for that? How do we collaborate with them? The patient selection is so fundamentally important to define the time course of the disease, the relevance of the target at a particular time, when to intervene, what to measure. So we could go on, and all these points were well brought out in the various panels. But from my point of view, there's no way GSK will ever have the internal expertise to address all of those challenges. And therefore, we've got a range of ways that we interact with the world, and this is one of them. We've participated in the DDF, which has been terrific. We've got a number of bespoke arrangements with academic centers. We've got a program called Neuro 2020. It's a little bit like this. It's a call for applications to GSK, where we work as partners together and then decide if there's funding that's required to bring something along. And I think this one just adds to the armamentarium for me. It's another way of getting something catalyzed or seeded. And it strikes me that, Chris, as we go through the applications, probably we should think about is what are the proposals that would not have happened
Yep.
if we don't seed the people getting together in the room. And one of the prior panelists talked about, don't we need to like lock ourselves in a room for a month and really like go through the details? And that's what this kind of
Yep.
funding can do.
Yep.
Give people the time and the space to sort of get around the project really deeply, decide if it has legs, and then go for grant money or whatever. So that's my perspective on what this could be.
Absolutely. And John, from your long experience, obviously being on the academic side and now a senior leader in one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, what makes for a good team? What, when you reflect back on things that have successfully moved through the system and gone into full deployment, how do you judge a team both as you're assembling it, but also as you evaluate the outcomes when the work is done?
Well, one is by the definition of whom you're including on the team. And in this context, it's absolutely the full sort of cohort of people, both internal and external. And you really have to feel that chemistry when you're starting one of these relationships, because you're in it for a decade sometimes. And hey, you have the tough conversations up front about the decision-making, the ownership, and the IP and all that. But then it's got to be a warm, collaborative, deep understanding of trying to solve the same thing and committed to getting there together. Those are some elements.
And then what about embracing risk? The kind of the dynamic trade-off between putting together folks who maybe cross over boundaries within the community, and trying to get an outcome that drives further up the curve than might otherwise have happened. Is there tools or just cultural aspects that allow risk to be more directly embraced?
Yeah, I think there's two different things there. There's risk tolerance, and then there's whether it can be mitigated or worsened by a collaboration, I think. So on the tolerance side, and someone addressed this earlier, you've got to have some guts to invest in this area. This isn't a quick win. So if a VC is looking to get 8x return in 6 months, it's not going to happen here clearly. And I think ultimately it's going to require large pharma to put up some big bucks and commitment over time, and some of the other companies we heard from have done so, and GSK is as well. And to me, that risk tolerance, yes, and someone mentioned a couple $100 million required, is mitigated by having a stepwise risk mitigation strategy. So that's why we're really keenly interested in not advancing just our assets, but advancing the field. Because as the biomarkers and the imaging strategies and their relevance to clinical outcomes become clearer, that allows us to have development programs with better risk discharge along the way, and therefore more ambition to invest in more programs.
And maybe to bring this full circle, it sounds like you're also saying the arc of that collaboration can be established very early, and a program like this that attempts to drive the teams to aspire to a higher level might give us, again, greater outcomes in the end if we start them on the right path in the beginning.
I think so. I mean, I want to overstate it, but I think this mechanism can be really helpful to get, again, ideas out there that wouldn't have gone to the next step. And then one has to be really careful about, well, what is the risk discharge plan? So yeah, it's a great idea, but when are we going to know when it starts to look like it's going to work? And equally, when it becomes clear it's not going to work, and back out. Because ultimately it's an opportunity cost for other programs that the partnership could do.
Great. Like all the other sessions, if audience members have questions, we're equipped to see them. We're not going to stay up indefinitely, so we wanted to hit these key points. I also want to for sure thank the overall sponsors of the forum, but also on this Challenge Grant program, Wellcome Trust and Imperial College Health Partners are also helping to sponsor this. And I think we're all basically collaborators and trying to get some new launches here. And I want to again thank the team that both the folks helped design the program as well as those who will be evaluating the proposals, including folks from GSK. So seeing no questions, we will go to the close. We will soon go to the close. I think our next speakers will be here in a moment. John, anything you want to tell us about the next few years for GSK?
No. I'm not going to advertise for GSK, other than to say, I guess I am. Well, Minli talked about our programs and our interest in the neuroscience area. Maybe I just expand a little bit on establishing good relationships with academic partners. And I think increasingly it's going to require multiple different partners at the table. So it could be a technology company and a pharma company and a patient advocacy organization. And it's really, how do we work together to, frankly, in the contract stage, not fight over, very small facts. And, very often our institutions, not ours specifically, but institutions like ours get ourselves hung up in the contractual stage. And I think we could help to not do that.
So you were a core faculty member at a fabulous hospital for more than a decade, and you went to the associate.
I don't want to, for clarity, I wasn't a faculty member. I was a perpetual fellow.
All right.
So those who went through MGH will know that you're an instructor for like 27 years. So I was wondering.
Okay. You remember the team. What do you know now you wish you knew when you were starting your career at MGH?
Wow. Okay, we're really killing time, aren't we?
No, they're standing. They are standing there, and his family did not ask me to ask this question. This is something, though, I think that speaks directly to this idea of collaboration, and very few people have lived, been on the path you've been on.
Yeah, I'd say not to be afraid to take some risks in your career, and various people, in fact, essentially everyone up here has done something as an unusual path to get where they are. And, that's going to be increasingly required, I think, if there's young folks or people who train young folks to think about, to really challenge them to take some earlier risks and to understand what the possible might be. When I went to medical school, you were going to be a doc and see patients all day long, and it took me a while to figure out that that's not the path necessarily.
Good. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, John. And I think the final speakers are coming up.